All right, I'm going to go ahead and get started. So welcome everybody to our September Tableau user group. I'm excited to have a little bit of a different format today. I'm doing a panel discussion in our second half. I do want to remind you that there is going to be a drawing for a free e-learning license, which is Tableau's platform to kind of help you, gives you role-based subscription learning to help you learn all of their various products within the suite. So stick around at the very end for that, for your chance to enter. As I do at the beginning of every meeting, again, if you want to make sure that you're not missing communications, future events, as well as the follow-up emails that I send out with any materials that are being shared from the user group meetings that we have, make sure you're subscribed to our Tableau user group page. And that's just usergroups.tableau.com/Pittsburgh. That's actually what's called our hub page. So you'll see that subscribe for updates as opposed to just the RSVP page that you'll see on each of our individual events. So if you subscribe for updates, you'll be ensured to not miss any emails that I send out. Some Tableau happenings, obviously the biggest one. Hopefully everybody has seen that Tableau Conference. The date has officially been set. Woohoo! And some kind of highlights that I wanted to pull out. One, make sure that you're registered so that you can start kind of scheduling for sessions as soon as they release and kind of get your calendar set up. That way, day of, you're not scrambling to figure out what you want to go watch. And then this year, they're going to have more product focused sessions as well as a lot of community focused sessions. So really a lot of opportunity to find things that you're interested in. Additionally, with the acquisition of Slack, you're actually going to be able to communicate with different people via Slack, as well as similar to last year, there will also be brain dates. Highly encourage those. Some of those are more structured where the person who created it's going to have an agenda, possibly a presentation, but a lot of them are very, just discussion, communication based, and it really gives you a chance to talk with people who are interested in the same subjects as you. So really check those out if you have time. Something that I mentioned at our last meeting, there's also a data book club that is hosted by Brandy Beals. So if you're interested in reading books related to data and talking about them with other people who have read them, do sign up for that. These actual links are in this presentation when I send it out. So I'm sure you can Google it, but if you can't find the link, they're included in this. So check it out. Our agenda today. So first up, we are going to have Persuade Quietly. So dashboards that motivate action without shouting. This was posted in our content preview. So Lee Feinberg is going to walk us through this presentation that he built. Lee is the founder of Decision Biz. He used to run the New Jersey, New York Tableau user group from 2010 to 2018. He was also a Tableau customer before founding his company. And they do a lot of good work that will definitely, I'm sure, be highlighted in his presentation today. And then after Lee speaks, we're going to have our certification panel discussion. I'm going to start off and kind of give you a lot of updates around the certifications. I'm sure a lot of you have seen many changes coming down the pipeline. Those are going to continue. So we'll go over kind of what to expect from certifications, as well as hear from several of our community members on their experiences with the certifications, and have some time at the end. If you do have questions that you did not get to put in your RSVP when you signed up for the meeting, feel free to throw those in the Q&A, and we will try to highlight those and answer those during the panel discussion. As a reminder, during the session, again, everyone is muted. So if you do have questions, whether that's for Lee or for the panel discussion, please post those in the Q&A box, which is different than the chat box. So feel free to put those in. We'll either answer those live or we'll answer those at the end of the actual presentation portion. As always, I will be sharing the materials after this, so no need to frantically write things down, as well as the recording for this session so that you can re-listen to any parts that you may need to. So without further ado, I'm going to say, let's begin, and I'm going to turn it over to you, Lee.
Thanks, Jen. All right, I'm going to, now that everybody can see me for a moment, I'm going to go off video just so I can make sure we have real good bandwidth for the rest of the conversation. Pittsburgh is dear to my heart, as Jen and some other folks know. My son's actually a student at the university. And as far as I know, he's only got 1 year left. So he just started his senior year, which is exciting. Unless he tells us otherwise, hopefully he'll graduate in May. Let me get the screen sharing going over here. Screen and beautiful. All right, let's jump right into this. So I want to start by kind of letting you think about one thing, and
just
that's
as an FYI, your notes are the primary.
Oh, they are? Oh,
Yes.
what happened? We were all good and the wrong thing came up. So let's do a new share. Let's try that. How about that?
I think maybe I see the background. Yeah, I see the full desktop now.
What's going on here?
There we go.
Okay.
Now I think you're all set.
All right, let's try that again. So the thing that when I talk to folks, they have a lot of frustrations when it comes to working with data and Tableau. And I want you to know that some of those frustrations are not your fault. And that's what I really want to talk to you about today. And if you're like I was, as Jen mentioned, I was a customer of Tableau early on. You may have put a lot of energy and mental power into creating your dashboards. And then you find out that either folks aren't able to create the kind of insights that they want, or maybe even that the engagement is pretty low. And you're wondering, what was all this for? We put a lot of work into it, but we're just not getting the value out of it. And I felt the same way. And rather than just being frustrated by it, I wanted to figure out how could I advance my skills to fix this problem and also work smarter and, of course, get better results. And so for over a decade now, I've been researching why these things happen and have developed what I consider pretty practical solutions. And I want to share some of those with you today over the next 30 minutes or so. And look for some things that you feel like you can implement. I'm going to cover a lot of areas. And what's most important is to pick out something that resonates with you, that you feel that you can take and start making some changes in the way that you do things. And of course, as you can always come back and look at the recording if you want to find some more things to work on. And I want to give you some ideas, that are really step-by-step things that you can do rather than just giving you some broad ideas. And it doesn't really matter if you are an advanced dashboard designer with Excel, or maybe even you're just starting out with Tableau Creator. These are things that hopefully will save you lots of time and help you have more impact. And I'm going to cover 3 ideas that I think might change the way you think about data visualization. And I know that kind of sounds a little bit dramatic, but I've seen that kind of change happen over and over with my clients, and it helps their companies, of course, but more importantly, I also find that it starts to help their careers when they can really start to make much more of a difference with the way they're having impact at work. And we'll have some time, as Jen said, for some Q&A at the end. So here I am over here, and I want to share something that I'm really proud of. I mentioned that my son's at the University of Pittsburgh. I've got a daughter who's at James Madison University. And last year, I volunteered to help them overhaul their COVID dashboard. You may have even seen that on the Tableau COVID page. They featured that, it might even still be featured up there. Now, the reason I'm bringing this up is that they had a lot of data, but they didn't really think about the message that they wanted to communicate. They just made a lot of charts and had a lot of numbers. And this was something that was not just that they were using internally, but that they were sharing with the entire unit. It was on Tableau Public. Of course, it was aimed really for families and students to get in there. And because there was just a lot there, it really wasn't being, a lot of people were viewing it, but it really was pretty confusing as to what was really the main point and making sure that they got across the right information. And that's really what I want to get into today, is this idea of, how do you make sure that what you're showing visually is communicating the message, not necessarily just showing the data in a good way. And they're distinctly different ideas. And just a little bit about myself before I get into all the guts of this. I have a consulting company called Decision Viz, and we really work on helping companies scale their data literacy and build their capabilities in data storytelling. Not specifically focused on just Tableau as a technology, but really as more of a way to change that they do their work overall in the company. And as you had mentioned in a nice intro, I'm really in love with Tableau. We were a customer way back in 2009, and I started Decision Viz in 2012. And I've been an ambassador, run a couple user groups, and I also teach Tableau at New York University. So that's all you need to know about me for now. So here are the three ideas I'd like to cover that really go beyond just the idea of building dashboards. So the first one is a visualization is a language you have to learn. It's not just about features and functions in the software. And just like other languages, there's rules, there's guidelines, there's strategies about how you use that. And with practice, like with other languages, you can get good at it. So you can get much better at visualization. The second thing, that your brain has automatic functions, and you may have heard of some of these things before, that help you decode visual patterns very rapidly. The problem is that when the brain gets confused, when it doesn't see the expected patterns. And so I'm going to teach you a little bit about how to create visualizations that fit those patterns. And the last one is 5 visualization traits. I call these foundational traits that really make up most of the work that you do in dashboards. And so when you get good at these, your dashboards will, I think, be more beautiful, but are also ultimately going to help people be persuaded to take action, which is really the most important thing in the end, right? We can make dashboards that look great. We can show the data correctly. We can follow all the best practices. But in the end, if no one is taking action, it doesn't really matter. So let me share an analogy about this idea how visualization is a language, and again, why it's more than just knowing, say, features and functions of software. So imagine that your company wants you to be good at writing, and they train you on every feature and function of Microsoft Word. But they don't teach you anything about the language of your country. So let's say it's English in this case. They don't teach you how to construct a sentence. They don't tell you how to craft a story. Now, with a little work, most of you have probably figured out it's this famous phrase, which is much easier to understand. But this is the problem that many of you have probably faced. Your company may have invested a lot of time and money to train you on software formally, or maybe they gave you the time to go and with Tableau, learn it online. There's, of course, lots of great resources. So you know how to use the software, but you've never been trained on what I call the language of visualization. You've never been trained on data storytelling, or even this concept called data literacy. So what happens is it doesn't really matter how many buttons you click in the software, or how well you know where the features are and how they work. Your visualizations just don't really hold up when it comes time to helping people make decisions and, as I've said, take action. And here's the rub. For some reason, management has this assumption that when you get good at the software, magically that makes you good at writing visual stories that are engaging and help persuade people. And many of you probably realize that that's a wrong assumption. And because of that, companies are really missing out on opportunities to make data more actionable. And so what I want to go over with you are some of these ideas that are going to help you fix that and overcome this gap in expectations. And before we jump in, I just want to give you a little bit of background on how the brain is set up to understand visual language. And I'm not going to show you the nines. I'm going to give you a little bit of a different view here, if for those of you who know what the nines are. So we have the ability as human beings to recognize very complex patterns in literally the blink of an eye. And what happens so fast, and I want to give you an idea that I think is going to kind of blow your mind. So think about this. So your brains are working on images as soon as we see them. So in a way, you're thinking about what it means before you're using effort to think about it. I know that sounds a little strange. So what happens though is when you don't show information in a way that gets the message across quickly, or it's confusing, it slows us down because it takes the brain longer to decipher what that meaning is. So when that happens to people, what goes on? Well, maybe they ignore it because they're confused and they could interpret it incorrectly, or maybe they just say, all right, I'm just going to move on to the next thing, which of course means then they're not using your visualization in the way that you intended it to. Now, if you're able to harness that processing power correctly, then you can wade through lots of information very fast and help people get to being able to make decisions and take action. So here's what's going on in terms of people interpreting those patterns and what I mean by that. And I've distilled this down into 5 common traits. There's a lot of other patterns that come about in terms of data visualization. I'm sure you use them. I'm sure you've seen them discussed. But I like to just break it down into something very simple that's a little bit more manageable. And I think all of these are going to be familiar to you, but maybe you didn't think about them in terms of patterns that the brain is processing. So the first one is location. Then we have size, gradients, which you might heard of as color intensity, color, which is different than gradients. Sometimes people call this color hue, and shape. Now, of course, the brain may not be looking for one of these alone. It knows how to handle them if they're combined, right? Because a lot of times these things are used together. And when you know how the brain is interpreting each of these, you're not just going to click it now in the software and say, I need color or I need size. You're actually going to be able to think about it more specifically about how you want to, say, write with it and how to use it in a way that is going to be easy for people to understand. Now, as most of us probably have experienced, it's pretty easy to use software like Tableau. But I want to suggest that's not necessarily a good thing. Let me tell you what I mean. So when you're using the software, we really tend to treat all 5 of these equally because it just takes a click and then it's on the chart. The thing is, each of these are not equal because some of them are actually easier for the brain to process. And this is really important. And the fact that some of these visuals are easier to process is what I call a hierarchy. It's not the same kind of hierarchy that you're used to in Tableau. So here's an example of what I mean. Depending on what you're trying to communicate, you would use size before gradients. We're going to get into why. And you potentially then would also want to use color before you used shapes. The reason is that you want to try to use the trait that's easier for the brain to interpret, because if you do, then it's just easier for the viewer to interpret your visual in general. Now, the thing again is if when you go against this hierarchy, what that really means is your audience is working harder to interpret the visual, or they could interpret it incorrectly, which of course, for people like us who are analysts, that's the worst thing that could happen. So for the discussion today, I'm going to focus on color and gradients out of the elements that are in that hierarchy, because I find that not only are these traits the most used, but they're probably the most abused. And we'll go into breaking down a few dashboards, which I'm showing you here. And these are real dashboards that have been published out on Tableau and Tableau Public. So we'll take a look at where they follow the hierarchy, where they don't, and then how to improve them. So when it comes to color and gradients, here are the 3 things that I find happens the most. And you'll probably start registering with yourself if you think that you've run into this. The first thing is just using too many gradients or colors. So what happens is nothing really stands out because there's so much going on and it's really hard to know what's important. The second thing is that you might be using the same gradient or colors to represent more than one thing on a dashboard. So that really messes with the reader's brain because it makes it harder for them to understand what they're looking at. And also they tend to try to make connections between the colors or gradients that are the same, and maybe there really isn't a connection there. So that can be confusing. And the last one is just using color when it's not needed, because when they see a color or a gradient, they're assuming that it has a meaning. And so they're trying to figure out what does it mean, and it really doesn't have anything. So again, this is all about trying to make it as simple and easy as possible for someone to read the page. Just like when you're writing with words, you want to make it as clear as possible. You try not to use any extra words or confusing words, right? We want to adopt those same ideas when it comes to writing visual. Now, there's probably a dozen other violations that I could list here when it comes to color and gradients, but we don't have time for all that. And I really want to get into some real practical things we can do. So here's the first example. And it seems that the author of this dashboard really likes to use the orange gradient. One problem is here that there were no color legends, so you really don't know what's going on. So right away, you're thinking that all of these shades of orange probably have something to do with each other. And in terms of other colors, you've got these green headers, shades of greens. You've got a gray background going on. You've got a pie chart with lots of other colors. And when it comes to color or gradients, again, the idea is you want your message to stand out. You don't want to use color for the sake of making it look pretty, making it fancy because your boss told you to make it look more colorful. These are all bad reasons to use color when it's not needed. So I added the color legends, and right away you can start to see some problems because the same gradients are used to represent multiple things. The amount of money expended on multiple charts is used with different dimensions. The ranges are different. You've got some of these orange colors again in the pie chart. So how can you possibly use this for making decisions when there's so much variability going on? It really doesn't really give it the kind of information that you're trying to deliver. So here's where that hierarchy comes in. Besides just having told you kind of the order that the brain tries to process those and which are easier, the hierarchy helps you figure out what to do in a case like this. So let's walk through how that works. What you want to do is with the hierarchy is look for whichever trait is the hardest to interpret that's being used in a visual, and then use a simpler trait to do that. So let's walk through how we're going to do that with the pie chart, and I'll step you through it. So in a pie chart, what's actually going on? It's actually using multiple traits. It's using size, right, of the slices. It's using color in the slices to distinguish between them. And it's also got labels, which is not necessarily on the hierarchy, but it is something that's used to encode the data. And what we want to do is find a way to get our point across as quickly as possible. So let's see how we can do this. So the hardest trait to interpret according to this hierarchy is going to be color. So we want to say, well, what happens if how can we remove color and make this simpler? So if we just remove color, this isn't really a very good solution because it just leaves the pie. Now we can't tell the slices apart that easily, except maybe for the labels and where they're divided. So that's not just a good solution on its own. So now what we need to do is say, well, what's left? We've got size. So can I use size in a different way? Instead of showing them as slices, what could I do? Well, you could show them as bars. And this is a big improvement because now I can easily see the size of the bars. I still have my values. I don't need the color. And we've simplified it down a lot. So I want to point out a common problem, which is when we're showing too much information just about a single metric or number. So another thing here is not related to the hierarchy, but something you can do again to simplify things. So for example, here on this label, they've got quite a lot of information. We probably don't need it all the way out that much. So you can see I've simplified it down to just kind of a single digit there, right? So you have to think about how to not overwhelm people. Is it important for them to have it all the way down to that single digits? If it is, fine, let them have it. If not, figure out how you can cut it down. So I find that it's very common to take a pie chart, make it into a bar chart is a very simple way to start simplifying your visuals. And again, it's that idea of going through the hierarchy. We got rid of the color, then we changed the size. So it's not just the process of saying what's going to look better. You could do that. What I'm giving you is a step-by-step way to go through your visuals and kind of methodically figure out the way to simplify them. So let's take another example here. I want to show you a way to take something complex like this on a chart and simplify it down. So I'm going to break away from something that's specific to the hierarchy for a second, because I want to give you an overall view of how to clean things up and get a simpler layout as well. So if you may have heard that people will start reading a dashboard kind of from the upper left corner. So that's where their eye goes first. And in this case, what somebody did is they showed this big number here. It took up a lot of space. And so I made something much simpler. So you can actually combine the drop-down menu to pick the year and the value into one nice clean line here. And I like that because it gives a lot of space back in terms of real estate that we can use. So let's take a look at the next thing. So then they had this big gradient here. And again, we want to make the information stand out. And this one happens to be sorted alphabetically, which can be kind of confusing because it's not clear why it should be alphabetical. So instead, if you sort it high to low, it's much better. Also, because we have some more space, we can get rid of the scrolling. So this is a much more common way that you would want to show something like this. Now I can see all the information at a glance. I don't have to scroll through it. I'm a big fan of looking for ways to get rid of scrolling. Here's the pie chart that we talked about that we turned into a bar chart. This part of the page, it seemed like they wanted to show a trend, but again, they were using gradients, which in fact isn't even needed because you've got the size of the bars. When you're showing a trend like this, you should really try to go for a line chart. And then we've got these last two gradients again here, and I decided to show those as bars. So I know I'm going through this kind of quickly. I'm just trying to give you an overview of some simplification methods. So we took this page, right? And also it had the background color of gray here, and I'm going to get rid of that in a second. And we ended up with something like this. This is an alternate version that is clearer. It gives you all of the data in a glance in the same amount of space. The other thing you may have noticed is that smaller bar chart that we use instead of a pie chart really helps because it saves us a lot of space, especially in Tableau. Pie charts tend to take up a lot of space and they're very difficult to manipulate. Let me get into this other example. Here, we've got the same things with colors. In fact, we've got the same color being used in 4 completely different sets of information. And as I said before, your brain sees this and says, well, I think that there must be some relationship, but in fact here, there is no relationship across these colors. So it's kind of confusing. And the purpose of color is to really help you focus in on something in particular. That's why they're so helpful, but it really matters how you're going to use this in your design. Now, what I think when I look at this kind of a dashboard is that the author was probably also trying to make it look cool because they threw in the tree maps, they've got the bubble charts, there's kind of a lot of different things going on. But your goal isn't to make it look cool. Maybe if you're doing something that's like an infographic, you want to kind of hype it up a little bit. But if you're making a dashboard that's meant to be communicating information, which is different, you don't really necessarily want to go for the cool factor. So let's take this one apart too. So we'll start with this pie chart. Now, we already know we can just turn that into a bar chart. So we'll do that. Now, for the second bar chart, we've got these 2 blues. It kind of almost feels more like a gradient, like a dark blue and a light blue. Now, gradients, you probably know, should only be used for measures. And here, it's using the colors, which feel more like gradients for this upstream and downstream. So I think it's better to use two very unique colors here. So I chose red and blue rather than using a gradient. This bubble chart in the lower corner, it's really kind of like a pie chart. So I just decided to go with a bar chart again. And this last thing here is a tree map. Now it's interesting because the tree map is actually talking about geographic information. So what if we actually just used a map? Okay. So we took this very complex combination of 4 different types of charts with lots of color and simplified it down tremendously. And we gave some real meaning to that geography. So let's talk about color and gradient here, because there's a good example of why I pointed out that they're 2 different things. So here we've got gradient, right? And just to make sure you understand what gradient means, it's measures and it's different shades of a single color or multiple colors. And when I say color, it means unique single colors, in this case, blue and red. So don't use these to make things look pretty like we saw in the original version of this. That's really where you start to get into trouble. And when you don't need specific colors, I like to use something like this gray. It's very neutral. You don't need anything to stand out. What you want to stand out is the meaning of the data, right? So you can see things quickly. In this case, the bars show you high to low values. You don't need to really point anything out specifically that you used color before like they were. All right, so let's wrap up with one more example and then we'll get to some Q&A. So again, lots of blue going on here. It's in every aspect of this. It's not only in the visuals and the chart types, but it's being used in the headers them as well of the titles. Also, again, no color legends. So it's when you look at this, it's very difficult to know what's going on. Now, I'm hoping that most of you use color legends regularly, but there are certainly times in these examples where they weren't. So I want to make sure to help you understand how important it is to make sure you include those and don't assume that people will understand what it means. There's also, again, a lot of different chart types going on here. You got tree maps, lines with multiple colors in it, stacked bars, dual axes. There's just a lot happening here. And that can really be hard on your eyes to have so many variations as well. And of course, we've got these multiple encodings going on. So let's see how we can simplify this. So first, just so you can see, I threw the color legends back in here so we can start picking out how we want to change this. So again, we've got the same colors and gradients that are used to represent information on multiple charts when there is no relationship. So you can't even use that for making decisions. So even if you had the legends on here, it'd be confusing and difficult to work with. So let's start with this line chart that has kind of multiple colors on it. So what they're doing here is they've combined location and gradient, right? So location is the line chart, and then they've thrown these gradients on top of it. And when you combine the traits, it is difficult for the brain to figure out how to process them in different ways, right? Because you're processing the trend of the line and trying to figure out what this gradient means at the same time. So again, when you're trying to simplify a chart, what you want to do is find the hardest trait and figure out how to get rid of it. So in this case, the hardest trait is gradient. And so when we take that out, what we need to do is figure out how to show the month over month change. We can't just remove the information that we're trying to get across. So here's the trend line. And here's one way that we can show the change that's happening month to month. There's lots of different ways. I just chose here one to show where the positive change is by using this bar chart. You could also show where the negative change is. So you could use red instead of the gray. Don't use red and green together because, number one, I won't get into the discussion about color vision deficiency or color blindness. Many of you probably know that, but you really only need to show the red or the green. Emphasize the positive or the negative. You don't need to do both. Okay, let's jump into this bar chart. You can also see here they're using the bar and the gradients. So you've got two things going on again, two of the traits, size and gradients. So let's see what we can do. Now, in this case, my assumption was that what the author of this was trying to do is actually show some type of relationship. They were trying to show the value of the bar and the value from the gradient. And when I think about relationships, the first thing I think about is an XY plot, okay, which is really using the easiest trait, which is location, which maybe you haven't thought about it that way before. So if you do that, you get something like this. And I like this because one, you can see a cluster of values here, and then these two look more like outliers. So not only is it visually easier to interpret, but from an analytics standpoint, it's much better because these kind of patterns and groupings would be hard to mentally interpret by just looking at the visual. So here's the before, and I'm going to show you an after, which I'll let you study because it incorporates a lot of the things we've already talked about, but I'm not going to go through all of them in detail. So here's the final. So there's a lot going on in here, but it showing you how I reimagined the entire thing by reducing some of the complications and I did add a little bit of color back in. I added the blue in just to give it a little bit of an interesting look. But I think the difference between these two is pretty stunning, and I'll let you decide which one you would maybe prefer to show your teams. So hopefully this, I know we went a very quick overview, but hopefully this idea of using the hierarchy is something that you can start to think about in your work and go back and look and see if some of these ideas apply and start making some of these kind of simple changes. One thing I just want to throw out to you that is another way to start simplifying your dashboards is to think about how you work with your titles. We didn't get into that today. That wasn't an aspect of this, but I got a free ebook you can download, and I'll make sure that Jen sends out the link for that. Lots of ways you can get in touch with me. Check out my YouTube channel. I've got some real interesting interviews with folks from the community out there, like Elisa Fink, who is the former CMO of Tableau, and lots of practitioners who give real helpful ideas about how they're using Tableau and analytics. And then feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn or Twitter or shoot me an email. All right, so let's see if Jen, we've got any Q&A or questions coming in.
Yeah, thanks, Lee. We actually got two questions. They're actually posted in the chat. So the first one would be, any tips on what is the best dashboard size for most viewers on a laptop or monitor, specifically when viewing in server?
Wow, that's a hard one. I can tell you that what I tend to do is not use automatic setting. So because that tends to, especially if you're trying to design a dashboard in a very specific way, you'll kind of get unknown results because your viewers have all different size monitors that they're working from. So what I end up doing with my clients is unfortunately going for a least common denominator. What I mean is I try to find the smallest view that most people will have and go for that, because I know that it will always work and things won't get misplaced because Tableau is trying to render it in a way that it thinks best. I haven't ever done this, but I'll have a suggestion that you could do, which is create multiple size dashboards, and you could put a selector on there. You could have navigation buttons where you could say, which size monitor do you have? And you could have different size views that way. If you know that you really, say, for example, want to have a view that accommodates super high resolution and make sure that you can give people more information, that would be a way to do it. Of course, it's more work on your side because you're doing it, but if it is a way you could give people a better experience. Does that make sense?
And I think I can add to that. That is like probably one of the toughest challenges. Obviously, I think automatic is the worst way to go, especially if you have any floating containers, right? Because those guys are going to go all over the place. If you do have people with adjusted sizes, I think personally, Lee, I would kind of go with the same thing as you said, right? Maybe not the smallest, but like, again, it goes back to knowing your audience and who's going to be using the dashboard, right? And determining kind of which size is going to be the best for the majority, right? It's probably never going to be perfect if you have a wide range of people looking at it, but I agree that kind of possibly creating multiple versions, or obviously there's the different, layout views where you have mobile, iPad, like those kinds of things.
Mhm.
So, but that is a hard question. He actually has a follow-up to that, which I know many people have different answers to, is there a rule of thumb for how many pieces of information should be on a dashboard? And his example is max 8 different worksheets or something like that. I know I've read under 12. I personally think it should be less than that. I mean, 8 to me is still pushing it. Obviously, it depends on your related content, but what's your answer for that, Lee?
Yeah, so there's a couple things to think about. So I'll give you the one first from a consumer standpoint in terms of absorbing information. So there's a couple things that go on when you think about presenting information. The first is, and I always use this idea of communication. So I like to have only pieces of information that are related to an idea on a dashboard versus say, I got to try to put a lot on it. So that's one thing. Second rule is I've always gone with, say, 3 or 4. I'll call them charts, because you can do some funky things where you can use some advanced techniques to get more than kind of one chart on a worksheet. So I don't want to go by worksheets in general. So I like to say like 3 or 4 charts that you're looking at, because again, I'm trying to soak it all in at once. And if I have too much going on, it's really hard for me to kind of start getting a feel for what's actually happening, and what all of this information is and how it's related and what I'm supposed to do to interpret it. So that's kind of a second rule. The third part is more technical, right? So depending on how much information you're trying to actually show on each chart can determine how fast those charts are going to be rendered in Tableau. So that could also be a complication. If you have 4, 5, 8, 12 charts, Tableau is doing a lot of processing to go and get that information as well. So that could just slow the experience down, which of course most users get pretty frustrated at. If it doesn't come up in a couple of seconds, they get annoyed. So that's more of the technical side that you have to be aware of. But I like to go for 3 or 4. If you have more than that, you should probably try to really split up your ideas onto different dashboards. It doesn't really cost you anything, right? In the days when I used to make dashboards, everybody was printing them out. There was there were no servers. Nothing happened online. So people tried to put a lot on the page because they didn't want to print out and use up a lot of paper, but it's not really an issue anymore. I hope that helps. For those of you who've got 12 and now you got to cut it down to 3 or 4, I just gave you quite an assignment.
Yeah, I really like the idea of especially keeping the focus on some central issue or question you're trying to answer, right? And if you have too many components, it's probably a different idea and should be a different dashboard. We do have one more question. Someone said the last sample you showed 2 sets of bars and the sort was different. Could you please comment on the selection of the sort or not to sort?
Yeah. So again, there's a couple of things to think about. So typically the brain likes to have things sorted. And human nature is, when you look at something like that, you're trying to figure out where the top and bottom is. So if it's important to show it in a particular order, let's say alphabetically, or maybe you're trying to show some newer, let's say it was products. You're trying to show the newer products first for some reason, right? In the order, and you should make it clear that that's what you're doing. Then I think it's good practice to show them that way. Otherwise, a couple things are going on. One, you're trying to figure out what the highest and lowest are because you want to know what the range is. And it's very difficult to do that if something's sorted alphabetically. Also, if things are scrolling, then that's also bad. So if I'm just showing you, say, a portion of if it's alphabetical, I don't know where the highest and lowest is. It could be above or below. So I start scrolling, and now there's a lot of work to go on there. So I always like to sort unless there's a reason not to. Then you have to decide to sort high or low, right? Because again, it goes back to what's most important. If I need to see the highest product sales, for example, then maybe, and I can't show it all and I have to scroll, then sure, high to low, and the lowest ones could be on the bottom, or vice versa. If I'm more concerned about the lower values, then I should show those first. It shouldn't just be arbitrary. It should be very purposeful. And remember, Tableau defaults to alphabetic. So don't just let it give you the default.
Awesome, thank you. And I think our final question is, and I think this is referencing the snippet in your name at the top. Where is the tabletop that you're standing on in the picture? I believe it's the same one I shared at the beginning of the presentation.
The tabletop.
It, like the rocks, you're on some kind of a ledge.
Oh yeah, the rocks. That was in, wait, which park was that? That was in Colorado National Monument Park, I think. I forgot what it's called. It's kind of like right when you're coming across from Utah into Colorado. Yeah, I did. The person who took the picture for me asked me if I wanted to go out even further. And I said, if my wife saw that picture, she would kill me if I really went all the way to the edge. So I only went close to the edge.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. And as Lee said, I will share anything he shares with me or the presentation. I'll definitely share in my follow-up email. So thank you very much, Lee. It was a great presentation.
Yeah, thanks everybody for your time and great questions.
So I'm going to steal back the control and kick off our panel discussion. Give me 1 second to share my screen again. Can somebody give me a thumbs up that you can share or you can see my screen? Cool, thanks, Zach. All right, so Tableau certifications. So if you've been with the group a while, back in 2019, I did do a presentation on the various Tableau certifications, what they are, how long they take, the recommended prep. And then I also went over my experience with taking the desktop certified associate exam, as well as I created a spot on our Tableau user group Google Drive that contains all the resources that I used in prepping for the exam. So since that time, there have obviously been a lot of changes, right? 2 whole years, a lot of changes to the current exams. So what you're seeing on the slide right now is the current list. If you go to the Tableau certification website, however, that list is a lot of changes if you start digging into the details. And I will tell you that our meeting kind of jumped the gun to a big announcement that's coming regarding one of the certifications tomorrow. So I will request that anything shared here, no posting or sharing until Tableau actually releases their information tomorrow. But as you can see here, so the previous lineup, there were 3 desktop exams. So we have the desktop specialist exam, the certified associate exam, and then the certified professional exam, all for Tableau desktop, as well as similar exams. There's a certified associate and a certified professional exam for Tableau server. As you can see by my lovely little picture attachments here, the exams that you can currently interact with would be those 4 that you see at the top. So the desktop specialist exam and the certified associate server exam, those exams are still current, right? You can still take them, you can sign up for them. The only changes coming to those, which has already happened, I believe, as of August, those changes took place. And again, correct me if anyone has taken it and I'm wrong, but these exams are actually converting to more knowledge-based exams. What that means is if you haven't taken any certifications exam, normally you're in a virtual machine and there are questions in the exam that require you to physically, to actually be in Tableau desktop, creating visualizations and answering questions regarding those things that you've created. So we'll call them more hands-on questions. Knowledge-based means exactly that. You're not going to have access to Tableau, online resources, or any of the things that you would have had for the hands-on exam. And it's really going to be your typical virtual exam where, all of the knowledge needs to come from your head and no resources. So you're not able to physically work out the problems. In addition to that, the certified associate exam for desktop, which you can see has the little X on it there. Tomorrow, Tableau is actually going to announce that exam is also being retired in addition to the ones that are already retired at the bottom. So both professional certifications have been retired. I believe the server one was put on halt because that was in person. So due to COVID last year, that one is put on halt and just is not coming back. The certified professional desktop exam, that one you still had the option through the end of August to take. And obviously if you took the exam before this retired date, you're still honored with that and your credentials still exist for as long as the expiration period goes. However, the Tableau certified associate exam, tomorrow Tableau is going to announce that one is also going to be retired on 9/30. Similar situation to the professional ones. If you've already signed up for it or you still want to take it, you have through this month. So it is September now. You have through this month to take that exam. However, where I believe Tableau is going, as you can see to the left of the certified associate exam, there is a data analyst exam, which is coming soon. If you are interested in that one, or you've already signed up for the certified associate and possibly want to switch to the data analyst one, I have included a link on this presentation. There is a form that you can sign up for to actually get notified of when that exam is going to be active. So just a lot of information. If you need to review any of this, obviously, I'm speaking all of this. There are links in this and I'm going to share it. But at the very bottom, you can go to tableau.com and go to their certification page. And there's a frequently asked questions. Other than the certified associate announcement, which is coming out tomorrow, everything else I just talked about is listed in the FAQ or within the actual certification itself. So if you go to the website and dig in, you'll be able to find those details. If you have any questions, again, please feel free to reach out to me on that. As far as why to take a certification, and again, our panelist is going to jump into their answers to this question. So if you look on Tableau on their website, so this is just a copy of kind of why they suggest you taking it, right? So again, it's a way to prove to yourself and maybe your company or prospective clients, right, depending on your role, able to prove your skills, you do receive recognition from Tableau for when you do take a certification. Some people may use it for continuing education credit, and et cetera. There's a bunch of different reasons. Obviously, it's personal to yourself and the goals for your career and your personal preferences. Why did I take the certification when I took it? Part of it was, kind of getting the recognition for my job. And if you work for a company that is a Tableau partner, they now actually require partner certifications. So that wasn't a requirement at the time. I kind of took it to, give myself and my clients that little extra credibility that I know what I'm talking about. So the same Tableau is actually requiring that through their partner certification. So that was really my main goal of it. And I think if you heard my presentation in 2019, I'm also a self-taught Tableau person. So, never had a mentor, never had any kind of formal training. So it was really my way of saying, like, do I really know this tool? And, taking the test, which was hard, made me feel a lot better about my self-education for Tableau. My experience with the desktop certified associate, it was a pretty seamless setup and pretty, seamless throughout. I did have some hiccups where my proctor wasn't responding right away, and I saw that clock ticking down and my screen was completely black. So there was, I did have a few moments of panic, but they do work. I still was able to finish the exam on time, and the proctor did work that out with me. I'm sure people have had similar experiences. I will say that the certifications are switching to Pearson VUE, which is the new company that's taking over doing these. And I'm preparing for the partner certification right now, and I would say the requirements are much more strict in terms of really making sure you test your environment. I had to disable a bunch of software that my company had on the computer just for being able to screen share, and the people who manage our IT to allow them to, fix things on my computer if they break. So I had to actually uninstall a bunch of stuff just to be able to take the exam. So I would recommend definitely giving yourself that time and going through that if you are scheduled for an exam. And then, I think that it doesn't really need to be said that if you fail to prepare, then probably prepare to fail. And I especially think if the exams are moving to a more knowledge-based where you can't physically be in Tableau and kind of checking some of those, I'll call them more book questions, like what is, the only feature that's not in the show me or something like that. Totally making that up, guys. But, certain ones of those kind of questions in a knowledge-based exam, you're really going to have to know the ins and outs, right? Because you're not going to be working through an actual problem to answer that question. So definitely take the time to prepare and use those exam guides. And finally, I share this usually every meeting. Obviously, practice is the best recommendation. Spend time in the tool before taking these tests. And there's so many resources for practice, especially now in, different data sets. And Makeover Monday, Workout Wednesday, a lot of times if you're using Tableau for business, right, we tend to do similar things over and over. So those really get you exposure to different data sets and different types of problems to solve, vizzes to create. So really take advantage of using those. And I'm sure you'll learn something new that maybe you haven't done in your daily work. As well as resources for learning. Obviously, each exam comes with a prep guide. There's tons of courses on Udemy. I know I used the Udemy course that basically just had 2 practice exams just to get back in the swing of being timed to complete something, right? That can be really stressful if you're not fresh out of college and you haven't taken a timed test in a while. So even just having that practice of finishing something in a certain amount of time, highly recommend. I have a bunch of other resources. Like I said, they're on the Google Drive, and a lot of the stuff that I use is there, as well as I'm going to add everything that the panel has shared with me today up there. So please take advantage of that. If you can't find it, just ask me. And then I did get a lot of questions from our last meeting as well as from this meeting. So in general, what we're going to do now is I'm going to let the panelists introduce themselves and basically tell you which certification or certifications they've taken and answer these basic questions, as well as kind of give you their best tip for preparation. Obviously, again, I'm going to share anything that they share with me. So right now we'll turn it over and I will just kind of pick on you guys, and then we're going to get into, I have some additional questions that we're going to open up to the group in general for after. So without further ado, I think the first person I see on my list, so Michael, I'm going to throw it to you to go ahead and introduce yourself and your exam experience.
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Michael Perillo. I am a user group ambassador, leader of the Phoenix Tableau user group. As far as certifications go, I've got desktop specialist, desktop associate, server certified associate, server certified professional, and certified associate consultant. So I'm missing, I guess, 2, but now that things are being retired, it's kind of a moot point. So I've been using Tableau since 2011. First time I took a certification was in 2013. My first Tableau conference. I took the server qualification exam. At the time, that's what it was branded as, and did well, and eventually went on to do my professional certification with that. So how long did I take to prep? It depends. When I first went in to my first certification, I wasn't even expecting to certify. I had previously gone to in-person training and, kind of done that whole thing. Ran into a couple of the trainers and they said, hey, we got some room if you want to certify. So I had zero preparation going into that very first one. And I just luckily passed based off of experience and, going through server upgrades, installs, configuration, knowing about the product for, probably a good year and a half. The certification process has significantly changed. There's a lot more resources and white papers and blogs and community that write up about their experience. And that's how I'd say, get prepared today. Depending on which certification you're going for, download the guides, understand what's in them, practice, practice, practice. Don't wait to the last minute if you're a procrastinator like me. Sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't. So I've actually taken 14 exams in that time. I have passed 9 of them. I've failed 5 of them. Just kind of an interesting story. One year I was taking a desktop exam and just got hung up on one particular question. It was a super easy question, map this, find an answer, and spent 10, 15 minutes just racking my brain because I just couldn't get it. Later that night, I kind of figured out what I did wrong. So for those of you who know, with mapping, there's the latitude, longitude. The data sources don't always necessarily use the built-in latitude, longitude. There could be a custom latitude, longitude, and that's what the problem was. It was named something different. I never put 2 and 2 together. The next day I took the exam, and since failing it, I got a 58%, passed it the next day with a 96%. So, you can go in feeling totally great and just bomb, but don't let that distract you. It could be one question like it was for me. That was really my hiccup. For best practices, tips, most everything right now is proctored. Just make sure you're familiar and comfortable being on camera, that your environment is clean. Tableau does a good job of, giving you all the information which you need to know. Same thing with the Proctor site. They'll be going to Pearson View. Just make sure you read through that, test your internet, make sure you're in a quiet place. Internet's, all to yourself. But yeah, above all, try to feel as good as you can. I think nervous energy is good, but be well rested. Don't go in there exhausted, making simple mistakes. How many questions are going to be on exam. Your time limit. So give yourself, X amount of time to answer a question before you can flag it and move on. Come back to it later. But yeah, overall, in my experience, I've done well on exams. The ones that I haven't, either I was unprepared, I spent way too much time on focusing on one particular topic or subject. So I think that's where reading the exam guides and kind of seeing the whole thing, understand where your comfort is. And if you don't have strength in one category, don't kill yourself trying to upskill, be awesome at the rest of it. And I think you should do okay.
Thanks, Michael. Phil, I'm going to go to you next.
All right, I am unmuted, so I assume you can hear me, but I'll also make the assumption that somebody will notify me if you can't. So a little bit about me. My name's Phil. A lot of love for Pittsburgh. I used to I used to live in upstate New York, and Pittsburgh was one of our main cities that we associated with. So I appreciate being here. About me right now, I'm a consultant with Tessellation. We're just a really cool group of people trying to do some business intelligence and data visualization and business analytics stuff. But before that, I was an independent consultant. I had gotten to a point where, honestly, for me, it was more risky to stay on the track that I was on working in nonprofits than it would be to try my own thing. And honestly, becoming certified was a big part of the confidence I would have in myself and could give to potential clients. And so I've historically always just loved the certification program. It's helped me get to be where I am today in many ways, and I really encourage everyone to, you know, definitely check out the certifications and see if they're a good fit for you. I think a big question that you have to answer for yourself, and that was an important part of keeping me motivated, was why is this needed? Why take a certification exam? And as I mentioned, for me, it was, you know, in that phase where I was starting to find my own clients, it was conveying that product knowledge, saying, yes, I am an expert with Tableau. I can do this, and you can have the faith that I have that knowledge to do this. Before that, when I was actually employed by a couple state agencies where I live now in Colorado, it was really to be able to sell the idea to people who hadn't yet heard of Tableau, but, you know, we were, you know, in the age of using a lot of Excel to do data visualization and reports like that. So I was really trying to do that. And then the third piece of why it was important to me was, you know, really, I don't have a background for doing this work. I have a master's degree in education administration. Before that, my bachelor's degree was in international relations, and it's, you know, I've never really had an analyst kind of background, but I was always the data guy on any of the project teams I worked on. So I wanted to actually have something that could be put on my resume, could be put on paper, could be put on my LinkedIn profile to say, yeah, this is something I can do, without making people actually go to my portfolio and look at some of the work that I've done in the past. So what certifications do I have? I'll put a little link here to my Credly badge in the chat. Let's see, make sure that goes to everyone. And so I now really just rely on my desktop certified professional exam, one of the ones that has recently retired. I also have the desktop associate consultant certification, which is for partner organizations. I had previously taken the desktop certified associate exam. The first time I took that one was in 2015 or so, something like that. No, it was 2016 at the Tableau Conference that year, and I did that in person there. Then the next time I took that was 2018, and I did that remotely at my home and everything like that. So that was really, really great. Yeah, and so that was really great to have both of those experiences. I actually had a really interesting conversation with the people at Tableau about why I would take one exam in one setting and environment, and why I would take it at a different one, and they were interested in the different experiences on that. So that I thought was pretty interesting. So how long had I used Tableau before taking a certification exam? So I started using Tableau around 2013, and as I mentioned, I think my first exam there was 2016. So a few years of using it, going really from dipping my toes in to then using it on mostly an everyday kind of basis. So I really got into Tableau around 2014, 2015, when I started using it for professional work rather than just learning it on my own as a tool. So next question, how long did I prepare, and by what means did I prepare? So I'm a huge proponent of more of the technical components of Tableau. I loved doing the Workout Wednesday activities. I dabbled a little bit in Makeover Monday, but for me, Workout Wednesday spoke more to where I wanted to be as a Tableau user. And that's really getting into the nuts and bolts on table calcs, level of detail, how to use mapping and geography in there. And once upon a time, Tableau didn't have spatial connectors. So how did we make maps? Well, everything was imported with CSVs and everything like that. So that was really interesting to learn how to pivot like that. I also am a big fan of Cole Knaflich's Storytelling with Data. I believe she does a website and everything on that now. As you can see, I'm an old fuddy-duddy, so I like books. I got several books out from the library and read through those just on various topics on data visualization, how to make effective visualizations. Some of it was Tableau specific, some of it wasn't. And again, more in that not Tableau specific domain was looking at Stephanie Evergreen's work. She's absolutely phenomenal and I love the work she does. So definitely check that out too. Overall, I'd say about 2 to 3 months of dedicated daily work, maybe an hour or two each day, plus using just the background I had from a few years of using the product for a while. I think that's really what allowed me to prepare well for each of the exams. Just give me a few months of lead time of really staying focused on the core learning components that were needed. So on exam day, how did I feel? Nervous, but prepared in each case. So for each of the exams, I really just felt like I know what to do with table calc. I know when to use it, how to adjust them, how to configure them. I knew how to configure a dashboard. I knew how to add in various actions for parameter actions, set actions, and so on. So I definitely knew, more so than my knowledge, the thing that would impact me was the time limitations. So that is always a consideration too, is not just do you know the material and content, but can you recall and use it quickly in each of the exams. So did you have any hiccups on exam day or any tips for the actual exam experience? Hiccups. So the first time I took the exam, it was at the Tableau Conference, and you go to the registration table and they tell you a code that you have to write down. And then when you actually go to sit at the computer, you have to type that code in and that tells you what exam. Apparently I wasn't listening to the right person. So I wrote down the wrong code. And it wasn't until about question 3 where I thought I was taking the certified associate exam that I realized I think this is the server exam, totally different. And I just had to raise my hand and say, I think I did something wrong. The staff there at Tableau were very easily able to fix that, get me squared away, and no further hiccups after that. I passed that day, so that felt good. The second time I took the certified associate exam was in my house here remotely, and initially there were some problems with the audio video connection. It wasn't working. I was able to swap out my computer real quick. Thank goodness I have extra computers laying around because I'm a geek like that, and that worked out fine. So some backup equipment can help if you're concerned about it. And then on the certified pro exam, everything went smoothly from a technical perspective. However, as I was getting ready to wrap up, I'm thinking, oh gosh, Phil, you did so well on this. Good for you. You feel confident. And then I click on like a next button, and then I realize there's a whole other section I have to complete here. So then I'm like scrambling to make sure that I get everything put together on that. And again, I've actually ended up passing that one as well. I've taken, I think, 4 exams now, one of them being that other one was the associate for the partner organization, and that was really good. So best tips for preparation, just everyday practice, really cover your bases and make sure you know what you're talking about. Make sure you're not just able to understand it for yourself, but try explaining it to other people. If you can do that, then I think you've really, got the knowledge base down. So there we go. That's me. Good luck.
Awesome. Thank you, Phil. I really like that last one. If you can explain things to other people, that really tests your knowledge. Sonia, I see you next, so please take it away.
There's the unmute button. I'm Sonia Reed. I work at Carnegie Mellon University here in Pittsburgh, and data analytics is part of my professional development performance plan. So I chose Tableau just because we had the enterprise license within the university, and it was just really fun to use. I started my certification with the Tableau Desktop Specialist readiness exam package. So I only have the Tableau Desktop Specialist certification. I was studying for the associate one, and now I might have to rethink more rules-based next steps for my performance plan as we enter next year. But when I talk about the readiness package, that's 6 weeks of interactive training, practice questions. They do a live online question and answer practice exam every Friday. And then you do get 2 chances at the exam itself. I booked it when it was half price, so it's a little more expensive for folks now. If you can expense that, I suggest seeing if it's covered either by your employer or, just putting it against your overhead. It took me about 6 weeks of interactive training because that's what was granted to me. During those 6 weeks, I did, like Phil, practice every day, look at what other people were doing, and I also utilized LinkedIn Learning as well as Coursera. So if you do have access to that LinkedIn Learning, used to be lynda.com, there's some really good overviews with practice files from that resource. I passed in actually January of this year, so it was a virtual environment. Yeah, the only hiccup I had in my exam experience was when they are doing that virtual machine, the setup time I hadn't factored in. So you have to have your room basically as bare bones as possible. And they spend like 20, 30 minutes making sure everything that you could potentially use to cheat is off of your computer as well as your physical environment. So I don't know how that's going to affect the knowledge-based exams, but if the data analytics exam going forward is using that at-home virtual machine component, another part of preparation is actually preparing your physical space as well as your desktop space to make sure everything is closed down. You don't even have so much as a poster or a picture on the wall. So that hiccup actually caused me to start my exam about half an hour later than my expected start time. My best tip for preparation is to review what other people are doing out there. Follow hashtags on Twitter. A lot of people have YouTube pages. It can be something as formal as Workout Wednesdays or revisualize the Monday one where you remake the pretty pictures. I forgot the quick blurb.
Makeover Monday.
Makeover Mondays, thank you. Yeah, I really liked Makeover Mondays. I found those open data sets really helpful and challenging, but it was also helpful for me to go just on YouTube and search for how do you do this, because different people do approach it in different ways. So yeah.
Awesome, Sonia. And did you answer how long had you actually been using Tableau before taking the desktop specialist?
A month, and then
Wow.
Yeah, so then I had 6 weeks to practice.
Right, awesome. Cool. Next I see Zach.
Hey, yeah. Hi, everybody. My name is Zach, guys. Thanks, Jen and team, for inviting me. I'm happy to be here. So a little bit about myself. I'm a Tableau ambassador for the data dev program. So I like to use the API, stuff like that. I've been using Tableau for about 12 years now. I'm the leader of the Columbus Tug, so you might see some other tug invites for other events. Come to Columbus. So can't say I'm a huge fan of Pittsburgh, being a Bengals fan, but you know that's neither here nor there. For work, I lead the Tableau COE for JP Morgan Chase. Certifications that I have the Desktop Associate, the Desktop Certified Professional, and the Server Certified Associate. I also have Alteryx, doesn't really apply, but in case you have Alteryx questions, I can help with those. As far as how long did I take it? So looking back at the Certified Professional for Desktop, I think I took it after about 6 years of using Tableau. Definitely don't need to wait that long, but that's just how it worked for me. I actually failed it the first time, so definitely don't feel bad about failing certifications. It happens. I took it again about 2 years later at the conference, and I passed it then. We did do that after data night out. So I took it the morning after data night out, which I can't recommend. That was a little bit of a struggle going out, enjoying food and beverages, maybe staying out a little too late, then coming back the next day and taking a test that is kind of tough was probably not the best route, but it all ended okay. So as far as prep, a couple of people have already said the things that I would recommend. I think naturally using the tool, using it as much as you can, using it day after day, there's nothing better than that. There have been a couple things that have been recommended about Makeover Monday, Workout Wednesday. I definitely would say that both of those would be good. The three things that I would say that are most important when it comes to, especially the certified professional, and I'm sure this is going to apply in the future exams, is best practices, technical aptitude, and speed. So you're going to learn the technical things by going through Workout Wednesday. You're going to learn the table calcs and the LOGs and how to make things relate to each other. Makeover Monday, I think you're going to learn more about the best practices. You're going to see people that are actually doing really neat things and designing well-crafted dashboards. And I think the best way to challenge yourself with speed is practice. So what I usually recommend for somebody that's going to take this exam is sit down and give yourself a goal to do something maybe in 45 minutes. Because that's exactly what's going to happen in Certified Professional and probably in some of these future exams is there's going to have 10 questions, whatever it may be. And a couple of those questions are going to be build a dashboard. It's not something simple. It's not something quick. So you really need to work on your speed of putting something together with the requirements and information and just say, what can I do in 45 minutes and practice and hone that speed. As far as other resources, I think really going through those, learning from the different communities, asking questions of people. There's a lot of blogs that are out there about this. The thing is that all of this is changing, but I'm sure that there's going to be a lot of community resources as well once we get past that. And this is a community that's ever evolving and always helping each other. I'm sure after we change all these things, you'll see plenty of new blog posts about what you should specifically look at. Hiccups and tips. A lot of these, probably the biggest thing for me is a lot of these exam companies, and I'm not sure about the one that they're moving to, but they don't like extra monitors. They don't like your own equipment, your own mouse, your own keyboard. A lot of times they want you to be bare bone, use your laptop and nothing else. So make sure that you're practicing in that environment. And I don't know what the new one is going to, but you don't want to go from using dual monitors or 3 monitors and your own mouse, your own keyboard and doing that all the time. And then exam day, you have to flip to one laptop with no extra stuff. It's going to be kind of a little shock to your system. And I think you're going to slow down. And like I said, speed is very important. But yeah, I think best tips, just practice, go through all the things. Everybody's had some great recommendations here. Just continue to use the tool and don't feel bad if you fail. It happens. Everybody fails sometimes. Just learn some more, practice some more, and try again.
Thanks, Zach. I really like the comment about not being afraid to fail. And I think Michael touched on it too. Don't spend or maybe spend more time on things you don't know, but don't overdo it, because it's still luck of the draw on what kind of questions you're going to get on exam day. I at least know on mine, I feel like if I could have picked a set of questions that were the worst to give myself, I probably got them. So I was convinced that I was going to fail. But again, things are weighted differently, and it's a well-rounded exam. So it's not going to be an entire exam on maps. I happened to get more mapping questions, and that was what I had used the least. So it's still luck of the draw. So yeah, don't be afraid if you fail. Just try and get that real well-rounded participation. Catherine, I see you next.
Okay, great. Thanks for having me today, guys. So my name is Catherine Telly. I'm a data analyst with the Southwestern Pennsylvania Regional Planning Commission, and my background is in GIS and planning. So luckily I was okay with the map questions. So I kind of wanted to speak today as maybe being more representative of a lower level Tableau user. We don't even use server at my work. I don't use Tableau desktop every day. I use Tableau Prep more these days. So, and I wanted to just go for the Certified Desktop Specialist exam. This was my first step in a series of professional certifications that I'm pursuing, and I wanted to see if I could prove that I knew what I thought I knew. So that was my motivation for taking it. I've been a user since about 2016, so I think that was circa Tableau 9.0. My employer had paid for me to attend both the introductory and advanced in-person trainings in 2016, but I hadn't taken any other official training since then. I attend 2 other virtual Tableau user groups. I do a lot of following blogs, Twitter, things like that. I tried to do a few makeover Mondays, and I never had time to finish them from week to week. So I practiced, but I didn't get that far. I had also, like Sonia, paid for the Desktop Specialist Readiness course on sale and did what I could in my spare time. I thought it was very helpful for the sample questions primarily. I followed the user forums a bit, and the rest of it, trying to balance real life constraints and study time. I wasn't able to complete the whole course, but I got through maybe 70% of it. I had also purchased a Udemy course, and like many of you that have purchased Udemy courses, it kind of sat there. The best practice, I think, is to you know what you know, and that's not going to change. You know what you're confident on. Think of, if you can find, they have a PDF that you can download that has kind of the layout for the exam. Look through that and see the areas that you're weak on, and then try to find ways to practice in those areas. And, trying to cram everything into your brain a week before the exam isn't really going to help you. It's that tactical knowledge of practicing and going through it that I think is going to be the most helpful. Any hiccups for the actual experience? So I did have one, and that's why I wanted to speak today. This was my first time with ever taking a virtual proctored exam. And as Sonia mentioned and the others, I had to take everything off your walls, anything that has words on it. I had to disconnect my second monitor and put it on the floor. And you have to take your camera and actually show the proctor your room so they can verify that it's clean for you to take the exam. I finished up about 40 minutes into my session. I reviewed my work and submitted my results, and I asked the proctor if it was okay to log out at this point. There was no response, so I thought, okay, I'm just going to go through my questions one more time, see if I missed anything. I asked again, still no response. So something had happened, and my proctor had pieced out my exam session. I signed out. I went back to the testing website, and it said that my exam was incomplete. And I'm thinking, oh no, what have I done? So I had to call the testing company and say, my proctor stopped responding during my exam, and I didn't know what to do. So for the next hour and 20 minutes, I was on hold with a few different customer service agents while they tried to track down my proctor. And finally, they did contact this person. He verified that I had finished. I was able to finally get my score and verify that I had completed it. So it was a bit stressful. It was not what I was expecting. I would recommend, if you run into something where your proctor isn't responding, I would not log out early again. I think I should have just stayed signed in. But again, I'd never done anything like this before, so it was a beginner mistake. But I just wanted to share that in case anyone else runs into this issue. stay logged in through your session, keep trying to get your proctor if they don't respond, and try to follow the directions as best as possible. My best tip for preparing, I would say, some of the other folks had mentioned this as well, flag your questions, the ones that you don't understand, so you can go back and revisit them later. I had found that some of the subsequent exam questions helped me to figure out the answer. So, I think maybe in the end there were 2 that I just couldn't answer, but the rest of them I was able to go back and figure out.
Awesome. That's a great point, Catherine, about, if you get stuck, I think Michael mentioned it too, just don't waste a ton of time, keep moving through. And yeah, sometimes a later question will help you answer a previous one. All right, last but not least for the introductions is Joe.
Oh, thank you, Jennifer. Hey folks, my name's Joe. I'm the Tableau person for Allegheny County here in Western Pennsylvania. So I'm kind of in the whole vertical from, configuring and architecting Tableau server in Azure to the server and site administration, and then to supporting desktop and prep and, handling all the contracts and everything like that. I think I've been doing this like probably for 3 years prior to taking the examination in June 2020. And then before that, I worked with a lot of databases. As far as prepping, I took about a month. And, over the course of a month, a few days a week, I'd spend like an hour a day going through the exam skills. They list about 3 or 4 pages of various skills. They break them out by topic. And I would basically read the skills and I would go into Tableau's documentation to sort of answer those various topics. And so when I was done, I had like, I don't know, a 10 or 15 page Word document, basically where I went through and sort of answered each skill with Tableau's documentation. And I shared that with Jennifer, who will make it available to everyone. In addition to that, Tableau included like 7 prep questions. So I went through those seven prep questions. As far as on exam day, I felt prepared, having done the job for, several years, or at least a few years, and having prepared for the skills. However, I thought the exam was very challenging and sort of academic or didactic in that you could be I think, first-rate Tableau server administrator and still struggle with and even fail the exam. So just, keep that in mind as you prepare and as you take it. As far as exam day tips, I thought your ability to function well during the exam is more important than your pre-exam studying. Good sleep is a must, eating well is a must. Be prepared for some administrative stuff that has to happen before you can start the exam. Expect questions that force you to evaluate each possible answer. Expect and be prepared to struggle. You can reference the application and search online, but you only have 90 minutes to answer 80 questions. And then go in with a plan for how you're going to approach the questions and allocate your time. You don't want to get too bogged down in a difficult question that's really in the minutia of the documentation, particularly if it's difficult to find where the minutia documentation lives. Overall, it was a fine experience. I don't have any plans to take any additional certification exams, but in the future, I'd probably take this again when it expires or whatever they're replacing it with.
Awesome. Thank you, Joe. So we did have a couple of, I'm not going to call them one-off questions, but additional questions that I'll feel free to let anyone jump in on. So this first one's for desktop. If you've gone through Tableau's e-learning courses, what other sources are best for supplementing any gaps between information tested and not covered in those courses? I think Michael actually touched on this in the chat, that you can actually, Tableau, you can go through an assessment and they can recommend based on your answers to that assessment, which e-learning courses to take. And then through the e-learning courses, I think, maybe people would agree that really kind of just match the guide for what the exam says you need to know in the e-learning courses. I imagine that's probably few and far between that Tableau's e-learning doesn't cover, the content that they're listed in the exam, but all of the other resources mentioned by the group will definitely supplement additional practice, right? For example, if there's a certain topic that you want more practice or reading on. Does anyone have anything to add to that?
Yeah, Tableau used to, in the exam prep guide, they used to provide links. So the different topic areas, hey, what do you need to know? Click on the link, you go and study that. They don't do that anymore, which I don't like, but at the same time, it forces you to go out and search and figure out what's what. So do your homework, you're learning while you're doing. So use that as a guide, you know, take those topics, go through, throw it in Google. Usually it's going to reference either a white paper, a blog, a knowledge base article, something, and then create your own document from that. So while the e-learning is helpful and it's going to probably get you 80, 90% of the way through, you could do this all for free. None of the questions that they answer are hidden. The information is out there publicly in the help guide, in the KB articles, in the white papers, in blogs, videos. So do your due diligence and, you know, you'll be fine.
Yes, I think the next question we pretty much answered. Everybody made you aware that you can flag questions. Definitely don't spend a lot of time during the exam. Move on and come back to them if you're spending too much time, because again, it's about being efficient. So answer everything that you know, general test taking tips. Did anyone not get the chance to mention any other time management best practices? I think everybody covered that very well. Okay. Do you hold any certifications outside of Tableau that you feel are essential and worth the future recertification requirements? I know Zach had mentioned an Alteryx, possibly a certification. There are a ton of other tools with a ton of certifications. Did anybody want to chime in on any complementary certifications that they took for any reason?
So I think if you're going towards server architecture design, things are moving to the cloud, Azure, AWS. There's things with automation, even Salesforce now. So Tableau is a Salesforce customer. Start looking at some of the Salesforce certifications, Einstein, Tableau CRM, things around that.
The only thing I'd say is, so I mentioned Alteryx. I think Alteryx is a great tool, works very well with Tableau. One of the things, if you know anything about Alteryx and you're interested, one thing that I'd love for Tableau to learn from Alteryx is free. So Alteryx exams are free, and you can also take them once a week. So if you fail it, the only harm is you take it again in a week. So just shout out to anybody Tableau on the line. There's maybe some opportunities there.
Awesome. I actually didn't know that, Zach. Thanks for sharing.
Yeah.
Anyone else on that one?
Yeah, I'll just echo Alteryx. I have that certification as well. I think it's also just a great understanding for you to better know how data structures work for being able to then work in Tableau and present that information. Yeah, and I actually have upcoming another certification, DA 100. So if you know what that is, kudos to you. It's a Microsoft tool. So.
Thanks, Phil. The next question is for someone who doesn't use Tableau in their daily work. Do you have any advice on how I can speed up my expertise so Tableau becomes the first thing I turn to over Excel, which might not necessarily be the most efficient and effective form? So I think anyone who can speak to, maybe that doesn't get to use Tableau in and out every day, how you were able to do this.
I can speak to that a little bit. So Tableau Public is free. There's a lot of exercises available online. You can follow, like the other panelists had said, Makeover Monday, Workout Wednesday, practice those things in Tableau Public. If it fits your budget, Tableau does offer a creator license for individuals. It's $70 a month, I believe, and you can get access to Tableau Desktop, Tableau Prep, and I think an online version of Tableau Server that would give you the ability to practice with the full platform in your own time.
I think what kind of drove my transition fundamentally was just understanding what the different pill colors were and then where things went through trial and error. And then one of the reasons I choose Tableau over Excel now is you can make changes to the data that are not reflective in the actual data set itself. So you can, play around with how things are organized without necessarily making a bajillion copies in version 2 filing data sets and cleaning. You can put things in different places with Tableau once you get comfortable with it. That's just more usable than Excel, but there is a learning curve for what goes where and what color means what and how to get around, you know, filters and cleaning.
Awesome, thank you. The next one, were there any questions that you felt, I'm going to say you felt, did not fall within the study guidelines provided by Tableau? Did anybody get, anything that was thrown off the wall? Again, got to remember the study guide isn't, it's vague in a sense that it's, not 100% going to say this type of question, but it's giving you, more topics. Does anybody want to speak to that?
I think there, you do your best you can following the guide, and again, looking at what other people's experience are. You can't anticipate every kind of question.
Right.
In all the times that I've taken an exam, I think maybe less than 5 questions have come up where I was like, this was never part of, any categorical, section that I've ever seen. But again, it's one question. Don't stay on it too long. If you want, what I like to do is just make notes on the computer. You can't use pen and paper, but you can certainly use Notepad. And take a mental visualization before you end your exam. Try to capture anything that you might want to take away, and as soon as that thing ends, then start doing a data dump, brain dump, and go back and look up what you think you need to study.
Thanks, Michael. The next one, I actually am curious, because obviously cost is an issue. These exams do cost, even though I guess the Alteryx one is free. Has your employer recognized or encouraged your certification, and do you plan to earn the next level? So I'll just ask, has anyone sought out the certifications and paid for them on their own? Or has everybody been able to, get some sort of the cost covered?
I had gone ahead, and paid for it on my own for the initial exam. And then after discussing it with my employer, that they're willing to pay for any additional.
Yeah, initially back in the days when I was with different employers, government and nonprofit work, I paid my way and took vacation time to attend TC conferences, paid for the exams on my own, and really had to personally invest in it in order to start making the case for it. Nowadays, it's a little bit easier with a different employer. So.
Yes, and I would encourage anyone, it doesn't hurt to ask an employer, right, to sponsor an exam or a conference or anything. The worst they're going to say is no, and at least you tried, and then you're covering it yourself. The last one, does anyone have one thing you wished you had studied more closely for any of the exams that you took?
I wish that I had spent a little bit more time on Tableau's order of operations. For newer Tableau users, I think sometimes what Tableau is doing in the background can be a little bit mystifying, and it would have helped me to spend a little bit more time on some of that, especially when it came to level of detail calculations.
Very cool. Anyone else? All right. So I think that's all of our questions. Checking the chat and the Q&A real quick to see if anybody has additional questions. And again, I'll throw responses to this in the PowerPoint. There'll be links to all of the resources that everybody mentioned, as well in a follow-up email. So really make sure that you're signed up for that. I did include some resources here, and again, some of the things were mentioned, and some of the panelists had sent me their resources ahead of time, so that's also included in this PowerPoint. I will add to that anything that was mentioned during the call today. Our next meeting, I just wanted to throw that out there. I'm shooting for October or November. So a Q4 meeting. I'm really looking to highlight community members. So if you work with a group, if you work by yourself, just to really, I would love to just do a share on how you're using Tableau at your work and what prompted your company to use it. So again, very short, I'm thinking a slide. So if your group would love to be involved, please reach out to me at pghtug@gmail.com on the slide there, as well as, if you do have a great use case, something you can share with the group, I would love to have you speak. So please reach out to me. I know several people have indicated that they would speak. So if you have on the RSVP, be looking for an email from me shortly. Really, there's a lot of great content to share. So if you are looking to speak, helps you build your skill set and speaking to audiences. So please reach out to me if you have anything to share. And last but not least, if I can get my slide to share, here is the form to enter. So if you are interested in Tableau's e-learning, I have a free license to give away. This license is good from a year for a year from when you start. So I'm going to drop this link in the chat, I hope. But please go to that form. 1 second, guys. I think I actually have to escape the presentation to get the link. So I'll do a random drawing. So please just enter your name and email into this form. I could not find a live draw. And so I just really wanted to get everybody a chance. Some people may not be interested in e-learning, or you already have a license, which great, happy learning. But if you don't and you want a chance to dig in, a reminder that the data literacy stuff on Tableau is free. So jump in and do that. And you might learn a thing or two, or share it with your less technical colleagues to bring up their data literacy skills. But go ahead and take a look at, sign up that link. And I just want to say thank you to all the presenters. This was really great information. I hope everybody took something away from this if you're preparing to do the certifications. And yes, they are changing, but I think, again, all of the test taking strategies, the preparation, it applies to really any certification as a whole. And just hopefully you're aware of all the resources out there to help you now. So once again, thank you to all of our panelists. Thanks to everybody that's joined. And I'll stick around just so everyone gets a chance to click on that link that is interested.